and obviously people have the slight delay as to when to come in, but I'll ask anybody to come in. If you want to come in, please put your yellow hand up, basically, so I know who we have in waiting for to basically do that. And thank you for starting the recording. Okay. Okay, Elaine, can we start off with any apologies, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Graham Brooks and Councillor Tommy McVeigh, both from Inverclyde Council. Okay,
thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest for any of the items in today's agenda? Nobody's indicating, so we'll take that nobody has any declarations of interest. Okay, the item number 1 is the minute from the last meeting. Is there any questions on that? Can we approve the minutes for the last meeting? Agreed. Okay, fine. Item 2 is the annual audited report on the annual accounts 2020 to 2021. Can we note and approve the report? Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you, Chair. I've a couple of questions that I'd certainly like answered first. I'll take it to page 20, the issue of the software provision, and if it could be explained to us in what way it didn't meet the definition of the provisions as per IAS 37 and what the actual implication of that is. Just I'd like an explanation of something that appears like that, and also be quite interested to hear a comment on the intangible assets addition as well. All of this would come under my general problem that I have with the so-called bespoke software that the council always seems to be spending extra money on. But anyway, I'll wait till I hear the explanation before I make any further comment.
Okay, is Mark Ferris here to answer the audit report?
Convener, I'm happy to try and provide a response, and I know we have Amy and Carla from Audit Scotland also on the call as well. They might want to add to anything that I say. Certainly my understanding in response to Councillor Sharkey's question is that in terms of the provision that there is, in effect, there has been a provision made in the unaudited accounts. Effectively, we had set money aside within the last financial year for costs that we knew we were going to be incurring, or the board were going to be incurring in the current financial year, and had provided for that. On closer scrutiny, I think there is a strict legal or accounting definition of a provision, which meant that there must be a legal obligation, and I think at the point that the accounts were compiled, that strict definition hadn't been complied with. So even though we knew that the board would have an obligation and had a commitment with regards to that spend, the legal definition, the legal kind of obligation hadn't quite been triggered. So effectively it's quite a fine distinction in terms of an accounting definition there. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Sharkey.
Okay.
No, that's no. Just want to say that's great, and this legal definition is where we would find under IAS 37. I take it.
It would be, yes. It would also be in the accounting code that applies to local authorities. So yeah.
That's right. Now,
Councillor Sharkey, there's somebody else wanting to come in with a question.
So well, I did indicate to you that I had a couple of questions, but I'm happy to take my place in the order.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ireland, would you like to answer the question, please?
Very much, Chair. It's page 45. It was something I was really pleased to see actually in there, because I know that there's been real difficulties with hiring staff. That's been in a few papers previously. So I was really pleased to see that they actually said a number of the vacancies are now filled. and that the staffing structure had been addressed. So I just wondered if there was any updates on how that's going, and to get the full complement, or is it still an ongoing issue? But I'm really pleased to see this in the accounts.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Robert, do you want to give an update on the staffing position?
Yes, obviously the accounts are a position as back in April. Unfortunately, staffing position isn't ideal. One of the papers later on refers to one of our valuers that we'd managed to recruit last year has handed in the resignation. They've been offered a position at a far higher salary than we were able to offer, and they're actually finishing up today. I was in the office thanking him for his contribution today, and one of the members of the management team who's on the call today, Jackie Murgatroyd, is also due to retire at the beginning of next year. So I suppose with recruitment and with personnel, it's always a fluid position. Unfortunately, certainly some of the positions that have got vacant are going to be proving harder to fill than others. We have taken steps to get advertising going for the valuer vacancy, and I'm just considering the options and what to do with the assistant assessor post at the moment. So it was ideal at the time that the accounts were being made up, but circumstances move on over that piece. But I will be keeping the board up to date on that as we go.
Oh, thank you very much for the update. Thank you, it's appreciated.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Begg.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'd like to draw attention to Audit Risk 3, Financial Sustainability, on page 26 and 27. On the second paragraph, recent legislation changes have impacted on resulting in new duties that are required to fulfill and tighten timelines. On the opposite page, due to pressures above, it is likely savings will be required over the medium term to achieve a break-even thing. And when we looked earlier in the same pages, we had to draw down £10,000 from reserves. Are we in a position that we are financially under-resourced?
Alistair, do you want to answer that question?
That's something of a leading question, Councillor. I would say in terms of the budget monitoring position for the current financial year, that the forecast position is break-even in line with the budget that was agreed at the beginning of the financial year. There is obviously a reserves balance that is held in contingency, and there's a minimum level of reserves that I would always recommend that the board would maintain in order to mitigate against any kind of financial risks or financial shocks to the organisation. And we anticipate that being maintained. It is obviously something that we actively keep under consideration as the board's medium-term financial outlook. And I would anticipate that when the board comes to consider the revenue estimates for the coming financial year, that is information and advice that we will be providing to the board as to what that medium-term outlook is shaping up to be, in light of what I hope will be an informative Scottish budget that will be announced next month. So I would anticipate that we will have further information on that at the board meeting coming up early next year, when next year's revenue estimates would be considered.
Thank you, Alistair.
Robert, are you wanting to comment on that question?
Just very briefly, I think Alistair covered it pretty well there, as much as at this point in time for the current year, where the budget's obviously been set and that's what we're working to. Future years are unknown. We don't live in isolation. There is, we are part of the real world and part of the real financial circumstances that are affecting all the public sector. But there are, as you quite rightly pointed out, additional requirements on us going forward. So we're not in a standstill world, but we do try and work in efficiencies, etc. But the process for the coming year is kicking off in the next week or so, and it will be iterative, and we'll come back to the board very shortly with hopefully something that we can all agree.
Councillor Sharkey, you wanted a second question?
Well, I didn't feel that my your first question was fully answered anyway, because I did raise the issue of the second point, which coincidentally matches page 45. We come back where it talks about the replacement of Progress, the core IT system, just to make sure that there isn't any other system that we're talking about. This is the one that's causing the issue number 2, but also who are the 3 other assessors' offices that are dealing with it, and do they have the similar problems? And coming back to page 26, the audit, the audit risk number 3, financial sustainability. It very specifically says there that no specific funding has been announced for the board to manage the additional, and it's acknowledged that there is additional pressures from COVID, and these are currently being met through our core budget and our reserves. So we haven't had any identified money for that, but have we identified the exact costs that COVID has given us?
Alistair, you wanting to attempt some of that, or Robert, do you want to come in?
Certainly, I think the first point around about the IT systems is maybe more for Robert to respond to.
Okay.
But the second point, you're correct, Councillor Sharkey, that there's no specific COVID-related funding that's been allocated to any valuation board, as far as I'm aware. In terms of COVID-related costs, I'm not aware of there being significant COVID-related costs that the board is incurring. I have to admit I'm not in the nuts and bolts of the detail in terms of day-to-day expenditure. Obviously, there will be a kind of revised operating arrangements that the board is undertaking just now, but I'm not aware of any significant COVID-related costs that the board is incurring. But again, Robert is potentially closer to that than I am, and I'll defer to his expertise on that.
And just before you do that, I mean, the audit risk specifically says that COVID-19 also impacted on resources. And what you're saying is that while you're acknowledging there is an impact, we haven't as yet measured that impact.
As I said, I think there is a slight difference in terms of within the council, for example, we have specific COVID budget, expenditure monitoring through the financial reporting that goes to each council board, which you'll be familiar with. We haven't put that in place, as I said, because I'm not aware of any significant COVID-related costs that the board is incurring. I appreciate there will be, as I said, changed operating arrangements, but as I said, in terms of the absolute detail about what specific COVID-related costs may be getting incurred by the board, that's not something that I'm aware of right at this point in time. But I would defer to Robert's experience and knowledge on that.
Can I perhaps come in there and just perhaps expand on a couple of points? I will come back to the software, so if I don't do, then please give me a kick. But just finishing up the COVID aspect of it. This was prior to my time taking over. However, the first paragraph on page 45 at the bottom, it does actually mention a cost of around about 50,000. Which was to enable remote working for the team, and the team were back up and running by during April after the first shutdown. Hello, I'm getting a message coming up. Can MD hear me at all?
No, you're fine.
Okay, you're fine. Sorry, I've got a message come up saying bad call quality, so if I do drop out, please let me know. So there was 50,000 to get the staff up and running in terms of remote access. Now that we're partially back in the office, there are enhanced cleaning costs involved. I don't have these to hand, but I do know that there is a private contractor who's coming in to undertake that work for us. In many ways, part of the problems is soft costs, if you like, where we can't train our staff quite as effectively as we would do when we're working remotely. There's also things like travel costs in terms of if we're going to survey a property. For a period there, we weren't able to car share, so there was double expenses within there. But in terms of substantial costs, it really was getting the staff up and running remotely. So hopefully that answers that particular point. Turning to the software aspect of it, the changes to the non-domestic rates reform in Barclay, unfortunately there wasn't an off-the-shelf solution there for us. So in conjunction with Ayrshire Valuation Joint Board, Dumfries and Galloway Council and Fife Council, we've jointly working with a developer who is producing a new system for ourselves. We've had to pause part of it just because there's some parts or some aspects of our job need delivered now, and we had to basically take a decision that to effectively go to a plan B short term to allow that to happen. There are a couple of areas I'm hoping to go live early in the new year, and we'll learn from their experiences and choose the right time to go live for us off of that. Hopefully that has answered both questions, but if I've missed anything, then please let me know.
No,
thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Sharkey, I'm convening this meeting, not you. Thank you very much for your reply, Robert. Now, Councillor Sharkey, if the questions haven't been answered, is there anything else that you want to bring up?
Well, certainly apart from your manners, one of the things I'd like to bring up is the just the general issue, right, of bespoke IT. Certainly, this isn't the only you're part of the council or part of local government activity, right, where I've heard that a problem with bespoke IT and the delays that come out, and in many cases it's inability to work. So I'm prepared to and hopeful that this one is one of the ones that works, but it's something I think that the whole board needs to take a very careful view on, and if there would be regular report backs for something, I'd be very, very happy with that, right? And again, wishing you success, but as I said, my experience, which is all I'm taking to this particular committee, is that there have been problems in the past and in other aspects, and I hope we don't see it here.
Thank you, Councillor Sharkey. Councillor Begg, you have another question?
I thought Robert Nichol was ahead of me, but maybe I missed something happening. Okay. I wanted to go on to page 49 there, and it was the risks. And first of all, I don't understand what 4, 5 and 20 mean. Is that 20 out of 100 or 20 out of 25? I can understand that likelihood and impact are multiplied together to give you the factor 20. But high, every one of these is high. Is there a comment related to these that just explain, this is awfully high? And while I've got this space, I would just say as an ex-IT manager to Jim, to Councillor Sharkey, if you haven't got it off the shelf, you've got to make it. And if you join up with other counties wanting the same thing, we are covering 3 counties and we're catching up with another 2 or 3, which is actually making the whole thing financially much better. And I think personally, as an ex-IT manager, I think it's a good decision. But anyway, going back to the risks, I'm concerned that everything is either very high or high.
Sir, do you want to explain?
If I can come in, convener, I'm happy to explain the scoring. Again, I might need Robert just to comment on the actual risks concerned, but certainly in terms of the scoring, it's usually in terms of the risk matrix that's used, it's usually a 5x5 score. So 5 being the highest. So if there was a high likelihood of something happening, that would be scored a 5. If there was a very low likelihood, it would be scored a 1. So if there's a high likelihood of something happening and then there's a high impact of as a result of that, then you would have a score of 25. That would be the maximum score. So hopefully that just explains a little bit of the scoring methodology there.
Could I perhaps add to what Alistair's just said there? In terms of the risks, and I probably do need to lean on some of the other members of the team who have been here a wee bit longer than myself, but I believe on page 48, under risks, the first paragraph, there was a report to the board on the 26th of February. And I think in the 2 paragraphs down, it talks about a total of 12 risks. So I think what we've got here is quite rightly highlighting the high risk areas. It's not to say that these are the only risks, but these are quite rightly the high risk ones. In many areas, from my own experience of working within joint boards, that there are numerous risks, and it's appropriate for the board members to be aware of the critical and high risk ones, and the ones which we're able to manage day to day. I think that's sort of management role and a management team role. So whilst it's quite correct that board members are concerned that there's a number of high risks, you'd probably be more concerned if there weren't any high risks, if I could put it that way to you. And these are the areas where I'm certainly expecting scrutiny from yourselves on, quite rightly so. But it's really just to highlight that these are the main risks that are affecting the board, but it's not the total risks that are affecting the board. Hopefully that has helped.
Councillor Sharkey, do you want to ask another question?
I would say it was just a comment on that point, because I was going to come in and say very much what Robert was saying. I mean, these grids are a standard tool now for councillors to assess these things. And I was very happy that it is in front of us. Indeed, that's all I was doing in my previous remarks, was highlighting a risk so that people would know that. What I would comment on this particular grid is not the statistical analysis or the risk management, but rather it's more the politics involved, because it says in one of them that the risk of unplanned electoral events, which are now an ever-increasing possibility, which I would have said was a political comment rather than one for a statistician or any other profession.
Okay, but considering we've got a by-election on just now that we would not have anticipated last year, yeah, it does happen. Lindsay, you were...
I thought it was a by-election now.
Sorry, thank you, convener. It was just to follow on from Robert's comments, because obviously we've been here for the period of time with the risks have been put in place. So Robert is correct, the corporate risk register was presented to the board in February board meeting. It was also presented in September as well. So we do biannually to ensure that the risks are reported to yourselves twice yearly. And at this point as well, there's no residual scoring there. So even though the score seems high, we have put controls and mitigations in place to hopefully bring these down so that we are hitting, obviously doing our statutory duties and making sure the risks are manageable.
Thank you, Lindsay. Can we note and approve the report, please? Okay, thank you. On to item number 3, the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report. Alistair, are you wanting to comment on this, or do we just go for the...
I'm happy for you to go straight to the recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions that any members have.
Okay then. Are there any questions on the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report? No. Can we agree the noting the report? Thank you. Thank you. The Electoral Update Report. Robert, obviously you want to comment on the fact that we're running a by-election at the moment.
Thank you. Yeah, that's certainly one of the features of the report. We've this time of year is normally getting towards the end of the sort of annual canvass period. I've spoken with the team this morning, and there's a handful of houses being canvassed today, which will complete the door-to-door aspect of the canvass. So progress has been well on track with that, and I think the teams have done a terrific job on it. You're quite correct to say by-elections been called within Paisley South, South East, sorry, and in conjunction with the returning officer, we've been working together on a project plan for it, supplying the polling card information to them and absent vote information to them, and that will be on an ongoing basis throughout there. It's perhaps worth noting that the last date for new electors within that ward to apply, which is at the bottom of page 84, is Thursday the 25th of November. And the last date for absent votes for that is the following day at 5 p.m. In terms of the new legislation, I mentioned the elections bill is working its way through the UK Parliament. Once we know that, once that's actually been enacted, we'll have a better idea of exactly what the implications are for ourselves. But it's certainly not going to be neutral if it goes through as is planned at the moment. So it's really just making members aware that these additional duties and things like that are coming down the line. Where, for example, the voter ID part of it, with the registration officer will need to issue free voter identification to those people who don't have a valid form of photo ID. We have something like 280,000 electors. If 1% of them require it, that's a lot of IDs that we need to do, and it's not something that we do at the moment. So as the legislation develops and the actual implications are, I'll be able to come to you with a better idea of what's actually going to be facing us. But happy to answer any questions on the report.
Okay, Robert. Councillor Ireland, you want to ask a question?
Thank you very much, Convener. I've got a couple of questions, but they're all on the same subject about the voter ID. If it's okay, if I could just read them out. I'm really concerned about the voter ID coming in. So there's a couple of things around that. What happens? And I think my first question was, what happens if you don't have it? I think you've kind of answered that, the saying that you would give out free sort of photo ID cards. But I suppose the question I now have, since you've said that, is will you receive additional funding from the UK government for that? Because that must be a substantial bulk of money to implement that. And also, what is the current system for citizens who live overseas? I'm unsure about what that is at the moment. And is there any indication that these changes will apply to Scottish government elections or local elections going forward? As I said, I'm just really concerned that there's going to be a whole tranche of people that are going to lose the ability to vote because of this. So yes, if you get any answers to any of that, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, Robert, do you want to answer the questions? Thanks.
Sure. In terms of voter ID and funding, there's been nothing concrete at this point in time. However, via the Scottish Assessors Association and various other organisations that we're party to, we have been in discussions with, it was the Cabinet Office, but it's now the Department for Levelling Up and Housing, I think it's called, that are taking it on there. But I think we're in a fortunate position that certainly at the moment, the officials that are involved in it are those who helped with canvass reform and who are also involved in individual electoral registration. So there's a knowledge of our business embedded within there. So there's been nothing concrete in terms of funding at the moment. However, I think there's a realisation that this isn't just something where you switch the tap on immediately, and we are working and will be working with them, looking at implementation plans for that aspect. So at this point in time, it's just a bill, it's not an act. So I don't want to scare you too much in any way at all. Once we know exactly what we need to do, then we can look at the actual costs involved and the implications for ourselves off of it. In terms of overseas voters, for UK parliamentary elections and elections which are governed by that franchise, if you were registered in the UK and then have left, then you can do a declaration of local connection for up to 15 years. So if, for example, you move to, say, Spain after having been registered in Paisley for 15 years, you can continue to vote. The proposal is that that 15-year cut-off won't happen anymore, and it will be for your lifetime. That's the generality of it. Obviously, there's slight complications around about the margins, but that hopefully answers that aspect of it. And sorry, trouble reading my writing. I think the other part was whether this was going to come into for Scottish elections. The franchise and electoral matters to do with local government elections and Scottish Parliament elections are a matter for the Scottish Parliament. At this point in time, I've got no indications that the UK elections bill will be enacted for, or the Scottish Government won't be bringing that forward at this point in time. I've got no indication of that. If that were to change, then obviously I'll report that back to the board. So at this point in time, these proposals are for UK parliamentary elections and I believe local elections in England and Wales. But because of the devolution of local government and Scottish Parliament electoral matters, that doesn't cover that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Innes, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, some of what I was going to ask, it's already been covered under this new legislation, really. I also share concerns that bringing in photo ID will disadvantage people in most disadvantaged areas, where they're least likely to be able to organise themselves or have photo ID at hand. And those are the areas where we see the least turnout just now, and probably areas that have to be targeted to get people onto the voters registration. So I think it's only going to make things worse, to be honest, in that respect. So it wasn't really a question, more a comment, and I think that's a lot of other people thinking the same there.
Thanks, Councillor Innes. I think though, once we get the actual bill in place and we get the detail of it, we'll be able to know exactly where we're going with it. But I totally agree with everybody. Voter ID by photograph is going to cause its problems more than anything else. Okay, can we note the report for the electoral update? Thank you. Okay, item number 5, the Barclay update. As was mentioned earlier, the item that took my attention was that Jackie's thinking of or will be retiring early next year. And just at this point, Jackie, we've known each other for an awful long time, for the nearly 15 years that I've been a councillor, and you've been nothing but professional and a great asset to the board. So I wish you well in your retirement. And I know Robert now is talking about your replacement, but I just wanted to say thanks for the board for all your hard work during the difficult times that we've had recently as well. So the Barclay report, is there any questions on the Barclay report? Is that a legacy hand, Councillor Innes, or you want to ask a question?
That was legacy, sorry.
Okay. So, can we accept the Barclay report, please, and note its content? Thank you. The non-domestic appeals. Again, over the COVID period, there's been a lot of new appeals come in, etc. And it's been a lot of hard work for the staff in this area. And please pass on my gratitude to all the staff for the work that's been done in the non-domestic appeals. I know there's still quite a few outstanding, but it is reducing every time we get a report, and well done as far as that's concerned. Are there any questions on the non-domestic appeals? No. Can we note, well, Councillor Ireland?
It was just a really quick one. It was just on page 96, just with regard to the Scottish Government changes. Is there any news on that at all? Do you expect them to be implemented?
Thanks, Robert. Do you want me to take that, Robert, unless you've got any update?
Be grateful.
Thank you. We are certainly very, very hopeful that they will obviously introduce that legislation. I hope I've kind of imparted how serious a matter it would be if this legislation doesn't come in. So we are hoping. I personally have not heard any update with regard to since I've put the report in. I don't know if Robert has had any update from the SAA on top of that.
I'm not sure I understand.
That's my phone. Sorry about that.
The only
refreshing honesty, I thought there.
The only update I've got is that the Scottish Assessors Association and the RICS gave some evidence to a Scottish Parliament committee earlier this week. Forgive me, I can't recall exactly which committee it was. Part of my weekend viewing will be looking at how that evidence session went, but the feedback that I got was that the committee were asking pertinent questions, and the participants were quite happy with how it had gone. So the legislation is working its way through the Scottish Parliament, and the one unknown is really how the appellants, if you like, react to it in terms of whether they try and find some kind of legal loophole and pursue the matter via the courts. That's out with our control, really. But I think we need to remember is that many of these appellants are businesses who have suffered during the pandemic, so I can understand if they were to take every avenue that was open to them. But it's out with our control to a great extent.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Begg, you were wanting to ask a question?
Is he talking to Tom Begg?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. First of all, Appendix 1. Secondly, both on Appendix 1, which is opposite page 98. I'm sure we haven't upped the rateable values to 2 billion and 54 million.
No.
Can we get a right number sometime?
We can. No, I was coming to that, Councillor Begg. Thank you.
And the other thing is, unless I'm reading what's happening here wrong, let me take education and training as an example. First rateable value under appeal is 13,700,000, and that was as at, if you like, that was the, I take it the total, and then the original was 10,600,000. And then you've actually dropped even below the original. Is that right? Or are there some numbers missing?
Right. No, first of all, if I could obviously clarify the correct figure from that, that's Councillor Begg. Well spotted, if anybody else had noticed it. There's an extra 4 in there. So if I can get it minuted, the correct figure should be 205/910,229.
So that's 254.
205, so it's 205,910,000.
So if I where does the 4 go?
Yeah, the 4 should be removed.
That's it, done it. Thank you. And on the other matters where it appears that somebody's who's challenged the rates even got below what they were before, or have I misread that?
Right, okay. How the table works is the rateable value under appeal is obviously in the first column, so that is what has been appealed. And the other two figures will depend on how many appeals have been settled and where that is sitting. So obviously for education and training, there were 76 subjects had been appealed. 73 of these have been settled so far or been disposed of. And the original value for those 73 would have been 10 million, and the adjusted value for them has went down to 9.8.
Right.
And the figure outstanding is still over. The RB still outstanding is for a sub one. That would be subjects that still have a value of 3,098,000.
Right. If I'm understanding you correctly, then the 3 million might be added to the 9 and take you somewhere between the 10 million and the 13.
Yes, as it goes on. It's obviously it's a changing figure.
I understand it perfectly. Thank you, Jacqueline.
No problem.
Thank you, Jacqueline. There's no other questions. Can we? Sorry, Jacqueline, you want to come back in?
No, only, convener, just because obviously you had thanked me for my time with the board, and can I just take this opportunity, please, obviously, to thank yourself, convener, and all the board members for all the support that I've had over the years, and including the staff, if it could just be minuted, obviously, for all the help and support. And I'd like to wish all of you and the staff best wishes for the future going forward.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, and we do wish you a great retirement. And if you go before the next board, let me know where you're going and I'll have a chat before that, okay?
Thank you, Kira.
Okay, thank you. Can we note the report, please? Thank you. Item 7 is the performance report. You have to note the report. Is there any questions for the report? No questions, so the report is noted. Thank you very much. Item 8, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee holiday. Robert has requested that we note this as a non-working day. Is that okay with the board? Can we approve that recommendation? That's fine, thank you very much. That recommendation is going through. I'm sure the staff will be happy with that, Robert. Item 9, the arrangements for future meetings. Elaine has drawn up a proposal that we have mixed both sitting in the actual Renfrewshire Council chamber for those that wish to come in, and with those still allowed to basically Skype or team in basically for the meeting, which Elaine will do the organisation for. Do we have any questions regarding this new arrangement? Okay, and we're all agreed to agree the recommendations of the report, and in future, i.e. in February, we have a mixed both live face-to-face, which we're starting to get a bit more better at, with people that can Skype in as well, that they don't need to travel. Councillor Innes, yes.
Yeah, just unmuting. Yeah, I mean, if there's going to be part face-to-face meetings, why are they not moving around the same councils as we were before?
Yeah, I know the answer to this. It's because they don't have the same system, IT system, but I'll let Elaine give you the details.
Okay, right.
Yeah, it's basically just Renfrewshire Council provide the secretariat for that, and we use a public eye system with Teams, which eventually East Renfrewshire will use, but Inverclyde are going to use WebEx with Teams. Yeah. And obviously, I couldn't ask them to do all the arrangements for the meetings that would be held in your authorities at the moment. It may well be that later in the year we're able to do that, but just to go forward with hybrid meetings, it would have to be in Renfrewshire so that it was our system and we were working it.
Okay, thank you for
that. Could I just correct something Audrey said? That is that she's talking about live in the chamber, but can I assure you that we're all still live when we're on the screen somewhere?
I should correct myself and say face-to-face in the chamber. Thank you for that, Tom.
I might have an amendment to that.
Thanks,
Okay,
Chair.
so we're agreed to go by Elaine's recommendations for the hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's agreed. So the last item, item 10, is the next meeting of the joint board will be held at 2 p.m. on the 25th of February. And I'm this time going to say it's quite early still, but as it's the last meeting of this year, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And let's hope that in next year, in 2022, we do have more live face-to-face meetings. Thank you for that. So goodbye to everybody. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.